Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, October 24th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Penn State game in 8 days, the game against Michigan in 36 days. On today's show, we're talking to our buddy Ross Fulton, the X's and O's guru at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And when we have Ross on the show, we're sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. All right, today we are talking about the Ohio State defense and their performance against the Wisconsin Badgers offense. Dominant, good, excellent. You can take your pick of words. We don't need, you probably don't need Ross to tell you that the Ohio State defense did pretty well against the Wisconsin offense. What we do need Ross here to do is to tell us how they did it and why they did it. So, Ross, I know we've talked a ton about the fronts for Ohio State this season. In previous years, over the span of a lot of years, it was just kind of 4 down, 1 gap. And this year it has been anything but just one thing. And they continue to mix things up again against Wisconsin.
Yeah, as we've discussed, I think that's probably the most noticeable area where Matt Patricia has changed from Jim Knowles and even defensive coordinators before him at Ohio State, where they were primarily a 4 down over front team. We could discuss this more during the bye week, but according to Tyler Maines at Bulmanac, who I've referenced his statistics before, they're still playing those 4 down fronts about a quarter of the time, but another quarter of the time they're playing penny or other odd fronts, of which this is one. So, penny we talked about, or as Matt Patricia refers to it as diamond, is that 5-1 look. I guess Wisconsin in here, obviously Wisconsin was using some heavier sets, multi tight ends trying to run the ball. This is actually 21 personnel, so they got a tight end and a fullback. Ohio State's actually in a bear front, so saw quite a bit of 3 linebacker looks in response to multi tight end sets from Wisconsin. So here you get similarly like the head up nose guard. You have 2 4-eye defensive linemen, but now you have the 2 linebackers stacked, right? And so then the 2 outside edge guys, of which Arvell Reese is one. So you got, and then at the snap, Wisconsin's going to run they run basically an outside split zone, right? So he's going to the backside fullback is going to try to clean up the trash. Ohio State basically uses a run blitz here, right? So you have, even though they're head up, they're still generally playing 1 gap or gap and a half technique. They're not really a true 2 gap nose guard. And so Will Smith is in for Cade McDonald here. He's going to play the backside A gap. Sonny Styles is blitzing at the snap. He takes the front side A. And then Peyton Pierce has the backside A, but also can sort of float. And you're just basically the same concept as the penny and the odd front, right? Or the 6-1 we've talked about, against these zone schemes. You're just taking away any double team from an offensive line. And you're just, gap hat on a hat with the offensive line. Obviously, Edric Houston here drives the Wisconsin right guard 3 yards in the backfield. So, putting aside scheme, I think that Wisconsin's offensive line was overmatched all day against Ohio State, which obviously makes it easier to play and why you get the massive discrepancy that you do. But still, you see the concept. You have the Jane McClain there, a lot of single high coverage. Again, we talked about, and we'll get in this in the past game as well, of Ohio State principally been a single high team, cover 3, cover 1. So getting a safety into the box, accounting for a gap as well. So again, just taking away, canceling out gaps, canceling out double teams. And, Patricia has shown that he is more than happy to, no matter how many bodies you want to put in to block on the run inside the box, he's happy to add numbers and, whether it's a 5-2, 6-1 safety down look.
And you mentioned how the Ohio State defense kind of controlled the line of scrimmage in a lot of cases. This next one, another example, instead of Edric Houston this time, it's Caden McDonald making a big play in the middle of the defensive line. And boy, when you can control the middle of that offensive line, that really makes a difference in the opponent's ability to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, so, I don't want to just suggest, though, that Ohio State and Patricia are just, always using just 7-8-man spacing, always just trying to add an extra body, right? You're just seeing a lot of different looks. And so here, Wisconsin, they try to throw Ohio State, right? They start with a tight bunch, then they spread out into an open 10 set, then they bring this fast motion in. We see Ohio State do this too. to try to now we're in 11. And Ohio State does not really match that. Like their nickel, Jermaine Matthews stays outside. Again, this is base cover 3 buzz like they like to play. But instead, when you get to the back view, it looks like the penny front, but it's actually an over, but similar in the sense that, again, Patricia likes having these outside linebacker edges, defensive end, whatever term you want to use, particularly against zone runs, right? And so we got a similar sort of 5-1 look, just without the head up nose guard. And then those edges are going to play heavy techniques like we've talked about, right? Like they're stepping inside, they're canceling out inside gaps, working to spill the ball. And so obviously, as you said, like, again, Ohio State's defensive line dominated, particularly in the interior. Caden McDonald continues to be a bear for anyone to try to block and handle inside. But like just looking at the bigger picture scheme thing, again, they're just a lot of different looks for an offense to deal with. We've talked about a lot of coverage, but you see that up front, right? Like whether they're stemming from over to Bayer or, just giving offenses and offensive lines a lot to think about.
And now we're going to shift from the run game to the pass game, and we're going to have one where both the front and the coverage gives the offense a lot to think about. And, we've talked also about all the sorts of sim pressures and then looking like you're bringing a bunch of different guys and then backing some guys out. This is an example where it sure looks like Kenyatta Jackson is going to be rushing the passer, and then he backs out and is in, Wisconsin ends up completing the pass, but you could very easily see Kenyatta Jackson being in a passing lane, a throwing lane here, if the receiver took one more step.
Exactly. So we talked a lot about, obviously, Matt Patricia's like sim pressures, right? A lot of 4-man pressures where you don't know where the rush is coming from. And usually that's paired with zone coverage behind it. But this is actually a cover 1 man sim pressure, right? And so, as you said, bringing both linebackers and dropping both defensive ends, and they're acting as robbers. Like we've talked about how teams have somewhat targeted them and kind of there's like underneath routes, like particularly Minnesota, that first drive had some success with that. And so as we talked about last week, like one of his responses is to drop these 2 routes in the hole. And obviously you're playing cover 1 with it. And so, this is a game you got a lot of this like cover 1 with some underneath, like a robber, 1 or 2 of them. And then you're trying to basically, by showing, as you said, Kenyatta Jackson trying to get, an offensive lineman to commit to him to free up, Arvell Reese coming off the edge or Sonny Styles attacking the A gap. So they, again, like probably, according to Tyler Maines, again, I highly recommend his stuff. The Ohio State's playing cover 3, like a little bit over 40% of the time. And the next closest is like cover 1 at like 26% of the time. And actually seen more of it probably the last couple of weeks, particularly, against Wisconsin, a team that not particularly threatened by the passing game, want to stop the run and, take away some of these underneath throws.
All right. Next up is going to, if you were just watching the game, if you're listening and you're wondering which play we're talking about, this is the one where the running back catches a pass out the flat and just very clearly makes a business decision. He sees Sonny Styles coming and either he has bad footing or he just says, no, thank you, and goes down. So that was kind of the amusing part of the play. The really interesting part of this play, though, is downfield, because Wisconsin runs a switch route here. And it's one of those things where you have seen teams screw this up all sorts of times. What jumped out to me, Ross, is, they're in like a zone, so it's okay. It makes sense. But it just looks so effortless. And so there's no miscommunication. There's no drama. There's no anything. It's just nope, no chance. There's nothing open down here.
Yeah, even in zone or man, I would say Ohio State has done a really good job all year trading off routes. Like even in, as I said, like in cover 1, if it's a deep over route, the free safety will pick up the route and the person whose man that was will drop back. Here, Ohio State's playing quarter, half. Nick Saban talked about this the other week with Matt Patricia, using this kind of splits coverage concept where you're playing cover 4 to one side or a man cover 4 and playing cover 2 to the opposite side. Again, so like Ohio State, as I said, principally a single high coverage team, right? So like 65% of the time, give or take, they're having a middle of the field safety. This is like an early down changeup for them, right? To play this quarter, half. So you're still getting like the 3 deep defenders, but as I said, splitting the field. One side you're playing quarters, the other side you're playing cover two. They trade off those routes. So like this is sort of how you would design it up, right? Where the corner is going to take number one vertical, the safety is going to take number two vertical, and then the flat defender Styles, if once he sees those vertical routes, he's now responsible for the flat, and so he cleans that up. So again, just a change up, seeing a little bit more of this sprinkled in, both this and then, half quarter we talked about where you're playing cover two to the field, cover four to the boundary. So, just seeing a little bit of change ups and, again, so it's like, compare it to the Jeff Hafley era, for example, when like Ohio State was a single high team and like just like wore it out, right? And teams, offenses could, by the end of the year, we're sort of picking on it because it's like if you're getting cover three all the time, you can obviously use cover three beaters. And here you're getting change ups, the other 35% of the time, this cover two, Tampa, that, can make it so the offense can't just predict, we know here comes single high coverages.
And the last thing that makes them a little unpredictable is sometimes they bring a bunch of pressure. I don't know if you've looked at the Tyler Main stats. I have not checked them on how often they're bringing pressure, but it feels like they're not bringing, 6 guys all that often, 5-6 guys all that often this year. This is an example where they do, but they bring it from an unpredictable places. You get a corner coming off the edge, but then you look downfield, they're running 4 verts. It's like, well, you're bringing all sorts of pressure. There should be someone open. You look downfield, and it's like, nope, there is also no one open, and there's also a bunch of pressure in the quarterback's face.
Yeah, I would say it's very rare. As I said, much more apt to use sim pressures, four-man pressures, right, where you don't quite know, bringing a linebacker, dropping a D end, or like 2, like we saw. This is so, I'd say it's pretty rare for a zone blitz like this. So by zone blitz, I just mean you're bringing 5 and playing zone behind it. But your like typical zone blitz is like 3 deep, 3 under, or even like a cover 2, 2 deep, 4 under. This is actually like a quarters pressure. So they're playing cover 4 and with only 2 underneath defenders. Works out really well here for Ohio State because, as you said, with the 4 verticals concept, like cover 4 is perfect for that. Each guy's picking up a vertical route. And then you just have the 2 underneath guys who are sort of like, again, similar to that cover 1 pressure. They're kind of like rats in the hole trying to take away the quick underneath throws. So again, seen this a few times from Patricia, these quarter pressures, bringing the pressure off the edge. Obviously, this eventually results in a sack. But again, you're just, every week there's sort of like a little bit different change ups, different pressure, like odd fronts, pressures, and the like. And so you kind of have, the base concepts, if you will, but then things sprinkled in on top of it to keep offenses off balance.
Well, you've heard Ross talk a bunch about Tyler Maines and his work and some of the statistical stuff that he's done. Next week, without a game to review, we're going to have a time to take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of that stuff and looking at how much they're using different coverages and said earlier, how much are they blitzing? So you're going to get into a little bit more of that kind of stuff next week. And then if you guys have other specific questions for us, the best place to ask those is on the Huddle Board, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. We always have a very lively conversation when around these shows on the Huddle Board. We also get this show a little bit earlier than the general public does, if you're a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. So you can join us there. You can also, if you have questions, you want to leave them in the comments on YouTube, you can do that as well. We'll try and get to some of those questions for next week because we will have a little bit of extra time next week to talk about stuff because, as I said, there will not be a game to break down. So, all right. And when Ross is back next week, we will once again be presented by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.